For 3 generations, the name McMahon has been synonymous with professional wrestling. In the decades preceding Vincent Kennedy McMahon's World Wrestling Federation, his father's Captiol Wrestling territory was considered the heart of the professional wrestling world. From Boston to Washington, D.C., Captiol enjoyed lucrative box office receipts, and New York's Madison Square Garden was its center stage. But how did the transition from old-school wrestling under the WWWF banner to the pop culture juggernaut and billion-dollar empire the WWE is today take place? Welcome to One Fall Theory. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Tim Hornbaker's Capitol Revolution, the rise of the McMahon Wrestling Empire. Specifically, we're going to be examining the deal that saw Vincent Kennedy buy out his father and associates. The deal that paved the way for Titan Sports to revolutionize professional wrestling and introduce the world to sports entertainment. Please stick around until the end of the passage because I'll be giving you my thoughts on the rise of the McMahon Wrestling Empire and its impact on global pop culture. Vincent Kennedy McMahon was an unyieldingly busy man during the latter stages of the 1970s, and by 1982 he was envisioning a full and complete buyout of the Capitol Wrestling Corporation. He maintained his duties as a commentator for WWF programming, but began to display his entrepreneurial spirit in 1979, when he purchased the Cape Cod Coliseum in Massachusetts. Running concerts, wrestling, and other athletic events, he experienced a side of the industry that most promoters really encountered and gained a great deal of wisdom. On February 21, 1980, he incorporated Titan Sports, and while no one would have disagreed he was an enterprising soul, it wasn't yet apparent that he would soon be a significant force. A few weeks shy of his 68th birthday, Vincent James McMahon was prepared to liquidate his shares and step down. The demands of full-time promotions and constant travelling were too much to endure. His health was also a concern. Understanding that his son Vincent Kennedy was a motivated buyer, McMahon engaged in preliminary talks and then received a formal proposal. On June 1982, McMahon and his 3 partners sold Capitol Wrestling, and the contract specified that Capitol Wrestling was to remain a subsidiary of Titan Sports. Titan bought 385 combined company shares from Gorilla Monsoon, Phil Zacco, and Arnold Scarland, paying $644,264, which was to be paid off within 1 year. Titan was to purchase the remaining 615 shares for $1 million. McMahon was to receive $822,132, Monsoon and Zacco $71,174, and Scarland $35,574. Again, all money was to be paid off within a single year, providing for a grace period of 15 days. The sale was effective immediately, and if there was a default not cured within the 15 days, the shares would be returned to their original owners. In that case, all money paid to that point would be kept. Vincent Kennedy and Titan Sports didn't default, and the sale was completed in June 1983. His designs on the wrestling business were uniquely aggressive, and expansion out of the restricted Northeast Territory was his goal. By signing deals with TV stations across the country and using Superstation WOR and the USA Cable Network, McMahon planned to send his wrestlers into cities once protected by the National Wrestling Alliance. He was advancing on his father's former peers with a dedicated vision and the courage to force change. The unwritten rules that had been the foundation of the industry were erased, and McMahon tackled all promoters, big and small, with little fear. Nothing was going to be the same. The NWA gathered for its annual convention in Las Vegas at the Dunes Hotel on August 22 and 23, 1983. Members were aware that change was imminent. The longtime secretary-treasurer of the organization, Jim Barnett, who would later work in various capacities for Titan, abruptly resigned the day before the first session convened. Vincent James maintained his membership in the NWA despite the sale of Capitol, but he did not attend the Vegas conclave. Not shockingly, days later, on August 31st, 1983, from his home in Fort Lauderdale, McMahon sent a letter to NWA President Bob Geigel notifying him of his resignation. He wished continued success for his many friends in the alliance. Regardless of the well-wishes, NWA members weren't pleased, and in fact, didn't know the full scope of the younger McMahon's plans. His rapid advancement was eye-opening, and many of the old-school promoters hoped to stifle the movement by personally calling his father. But Vincent James McMahon's days at the helm were over. His responsibilities were limited to advising his son and travelling to the Garden for sporadic events. The budding wrestling war was going to happen without his generalship, and no one knew whether his son's attempt to establish the sport's first national company was going to succeed or not. Vince Jr., as he was called, was going to sink or swim. The sale of Captiol Wrestling was kept secret. It wasn't until 1983 that publications announced Titan's ownership of the WWF and Vincent K was acknowledged as the man in charge. Full of energy and ideas, McMahon was a definite risk-taker and differed from his father and grandfather in the way he approached wrestling. He was optimistic, and while many of his methods were distinctly opposite those of his ancestors, many were similar. He would earn the same kind of loyalty from his inner circle of employees and followed his father's custom of taking care of certain retired personnel. It was a McMahon family tradition and spoke well of their commitment to those who'd given so much to the company behind the scenes. Champion for nearly 5 years, Bob Backlund remained the face of the organisation until December 26, 1983, when he was defeated for the WWF title by the Iron Sheik of Iran. There was room to debate the next step, and there were two options on the table. One was to re-establish Backlund as their top star, and the other was to propel Hulk Hogan, the towering blonde sensation fresh off an appearance in the mainstream film Rocky III, into the number one position. The younger McMahon didn't waste any time and made the biggest decision of his short career. On January 23, 1984, after a 5-minute 30-second match, Hogan pinned Sheik and won the WWF belt. In an instant, Vincent Kennedy McMahon and his superstar Hulk Hogan slammed the door closed on one era and opened the door on another. The World Wrestling Federation not only survived, but kicked out the competition, establishing a level of dominance never before seen in the history of wrestling. Okay, so before I give you my thoughts on Hornbaker's account of the McMahon purchase structure, I did first want to thank you all for listening. I have so thoroughly enjoyed creating the content for the channel so far, and although it is early days and I'm still trying to learn a little bit with each upload, I just want to thank all of you that watch and listen, and also, and particularly, take the time to comment and engage in discussion and debate in the comments section. In particular, our Montreal video has been absolutely sensational. We're up to about 22,000 views there. And in that comment section, it's just been brilliant to learn about your stories and your connection to wrestling. So I really hope to do the same here. And I know everyone says it, but every view and every like and every subscriber, it makes an enormous difference to growing channels. And I really do appreciate and value your time. But back to Hornbaker and the Capitol Revolution. The book as a whole, it does a great job of detailing the development of that Northeast Territory and the Capitol Wrestling Corporation. And the section that I focused on here, it sort of glosses over an enormous amount. And in fact, that whole paragraph towards the end warrants its own book. And Hornbaker does have another book called Death of the Territories, which we will absolutely be taking a look at in other videos. What I did think was fascinating here, though, is the structure and the conditions of the deal. I think there's this perception out there that Vincent Kennedy either was gifted the territory by his dad, or the complete opposite of that, and that he stole it from his dad. But I think what Hornbaker describes here is just as interesting. Far from being gifted or handed the keys, Vince has to meet a $1 million price tag, which in today's terms, adjusted for inflation, is about $3 million. And the 15-day default is also really interesting. Let me know if you agree with me, but I would say, does this suggest a distrust or a lack of belief that Vince can actually get this deal completed? It's documented that Vince tried his hand without relative success in other ventures. So this is it a contract formality, or does it just speak to something deeper in that McMahon father-son dynamic? One thing that isn't up for debate is the success that McMahon just manifested for himself through his relentless and his unceasing pursuit of his vision for professional wrestling. Now, at the time of recording, we're about 1 year removed from Vince McMahon's official retirement, in air quotations, and whilst he has returned to the WWE and he's been instrumental in negotiating buyers and also media right deals, there's still plenty of story to be written for wrestling and the McMahon family. So again, I want to thank you so much for listening. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. How big of an impact do you believe that Vince McMahon has had, not just on wrestling, but on global pop culture? And who do you think should take over from the WWE when Vince is gone? If you got value from this video, please do consider subscribing, and until next time, this has been One Full Theory, where we smarten up and smack down.